Pete DeBoer is out as head coach of the Dallas Stars. Instant reaction here on WFAA Plus. Mike Leslie, Michelle Montaigne, Andrew Seeley here with you to break it all down because this comes as a little bit of a surprise just because of the timing of it all, guys. I think when we got to game one of the Stanley Cup final, I think we all thought, all right, the time is probably come and gone. They're going to hang with DeBoer and give this one more shot. Ultimately, the discussions apparently needed to go on a couple days longer, and the decision comes down on this Friday morning that they are going to move on from Pete DeBoer. General Manager Jim Nill saying, after careful consideration, we believe that a new voice is needed in our locker room to push us closer to our goal of winning the Stanley Cup. We'd like to thank Pete for everything he has helped our organization achieve over the past 3 seasons and wish him nothing but the best moving forward. This is not the first time that Pete DeBoer has taken a team to 3 straight Western Conference or conference finals, and then been fairly shortly thereafter shown the door. Obviously, in Vegas, it took a season of missing the playoffs first before that happened, but a similar script, unfortunately, for Pete DeBoer, and he is no longer the head coach of the Dallas Stars. Michelle, I'll start with you. What is your reaction to this? What do you think of the move?
Just to your point, like at this point, I thought it would have happened earlier than today, Friday, more than a week after that game five exit. But I guess I'm also not surprised because of the way that everything went down, the fact that the players had to have their exit interviews with Jim Nill, and I think all that kind of took some time. Um, you know, to that point, like if you look at DeBoer's career and all the teams that he's coached with and the duration of time he's had with each of those franchises, he's done a lot of winning, but I think he's also done a lot of rubbing people the wrong way, like and wearing out his welcome. Um, I think that he said often, it's hard to win in this league. And especially in the Stanley Cup playoffs, like it is hard to win 7 game series time and time and time again. He obviously proved that he could win, but this move to me, and specifically what Jim Nill said in his comments about wanting a different voice in the locker room, this to me speaks more towards either DeBoer's relationship with the players and if he had lost the locker room more than it speaks to Pete DeBoer's ability to win as a head coach. And yes, obviously, like he's never won the big thing, like he's never hoisted the Stanley Cup, but he's done a lot of winning up to that point. And again, only one team wins it every year. So I think there's things to be said about the fact that he hasn't won it all, but he still has made it to the conference finals several times. I think it's 6 of the last 7 seasons or 6 of the last 8. Has been coached. One of the teams in the conference final has been coached by Pete DeBoer. But I think this says to me more, it's got to be something about the relationships there, and just how the players were responding to him, than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in and kind of echo those same sentiments. DeBoer's success is well documented at this point. I mean, the Stars themselves benefited from his own playoff failures, though. In 2020, DeBoer took over the Knights midway through that season, and then the Stars beat them in the Western Conference Final to go to the Stanley Cup Final in their first appearance since the early '90s, or the late '90s run. Where DeBoer is concerned, though, I think the troublesome part of this is that it's now a trend with throwing goaltenders under the bus, and this might make him a little persona non grata around the league if you've got a star goaltender that it's on the up and coming, because he threw a longtime veteran with a great track record of being a great human being on and off the ice and Marc-Andre Fleury under the bus with the Knights, and that was part of the reason why he kind of coached himself out of that job.
Yeah.
I mean, there was famously a meme going around that season of Fleury with a sword stabbing him through the back. Like that is essentially how the hockey world absorbed that entire decision. So to go from that to then go to what happened with Ottinger, it's just hard not to go exhibit A, exhibit B, as much success as this guy can have. And he might, understand his team to a certain degree. We saw multiple times during this playoff run where he just decided to take his guys out, or take Ottinger out, for instance, where it was just a kind of a wake-up call to them. It's different when you do it in an elimination game. And I think at that point, seeing him panic, because it felt like a panic move. I don't think anyone can argue that. And I feel like once he did it, he realized he couldn't go back on what he did, because I mean, most of us were sitting there thinking, hey, take him out for a period, fine. Throw him back in the second. Let him right the ship. You've already made your message here. And dying on that hill to some degree, which now we know he did. I just feel like most of the locker room, based off of their comments, Ottinger's comments, like this was a step too far with their season on the line, and what had been up to that point a magical season, especially when we consider how the Stars had responded after that point. You got to think it's at least 4-3 late. You know what I mean? Like that. There's so much that goes into this that it's hard not to look at this and think Nil and the rest of the staff that have kind of involved in this decision probably looked at this and thought, we're going to be a little more patient with our decision than DeBoer was in pulling Ottinger in Game 5. That's just to me the biggest dichotomy of all of this, Mike.
It's interesting because all through the playoff run, I noticed at various different points he was very willing, and at the time I looked at it as able to call out certain players that weren't performing up to their level. In the first round against the Avalanche, he was talking kind of just broad spectrum about, hey, all of our big guys have not scored. It's time. And it worked because it clicked that night. Like he said at a morning skate, and that night, I think that was the first game where Rantanen really came alive, and he wasn't alone in that. I want to say maybe it was Game 5 of the Avalanche series, maybe Game 4. Either way, it worked, and it worked immediately. And there were times during the playoff run where he was willing to call out Jason Robertson that, hey, you want to play more? Give us a reason to play you more. It's interesting now to look back over that playoff run and some of those comments and filter that through the lens of what is being suggested by some that maybe he was losing the locker room. And it makes you wonder, was he more willing to be critical because he felt like he wasn't being heard in the room, so I need to find another avenue to get my point across? Or in a worst case scenario, was it, well, what do I have to lose anyway? These guys aren't hearing me the same way that they were a year ago or 2 years ago. So this is probably not going in a good direction anyway. So it was kind of a last ditch effort to maybe get a point across. The handling of the Ottinger situation it's frustrating, I think, for Stars fans, because if you look back at that game, excuse me, as I'm out here in the backyard and the allergies are hitting me apparently. If you look back at that game, that's because somebody's going to clip that, and that's going to, anyway.
Coming up on UDSS this week.
You're talking to me.
As you look back at Game 5 and the way that Dallas did turn the momentum of that game at least a little bit after he made the decision that he did, there you can look at that through two different lenses. You can certainly look at that and say, hey, see, it kind of worked, because they were down 3-0, and I know that the third goal came after he made the move, and that's probably the goal that was maybe most damaging to their ability to make a comeback. So that's where this really does cut both ways. But they did wake up. They did spring to life. They did play much better the back half of the first period and a lot of the second period, and made a comeback in that game and made that a 1-goal game at 2 different points. But at the same time, and I heard it was a discussion even within the broadcast of, your best chance to win this game, though, is with number 29 between the pipes. And there's at least one goal, that very first goal that made it 3-0, that you look at and go, man, that's a goal that probably shouldn't have been let in. The goal off Asa Lindell's skate, that's the puck luck that the Stars seemed to have kind of the whole playoff run. I don't know that there's a whole lot that Ottinger could have done differently than Casey DeSmith did in that scenario. But it's hard not to wonder if they did ride that out with Ottinger, would he have given them a better chance to win? But would they have woken up if he didn't make that nuclear move that made the whole team go, whoa, hold on a second, you just pulled him after we're the ones to blame? Like, those 2 goals weren't on him. Those were 2 grade A chances for Edmonton. It was a series worth of, I think, frustration for Ottinger that built up. And Andrew, you said it, I think it was on some level a panic move.
Well, and I don't think that had he made the move and then said literally anything else post game, that it would have been as big of a deal. But for him to then double down and then to reference last season's playoff, Western Conference final series against Edmonton, it just felt like that. I mean, he didn't say something positive about Ottinger until his season finale comments. And even then, his first words were like, I'm doubling down, like it wasn't a small sample size. If that had worked, like you guys would be praising me right now. And then I think a couple questions later, he gets to the point of, hey, nobody's a bigger fan of Jake Ottinger than I am as a person or a goalie, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I just can't get past the fact, like, we, having covered all the professional teams in this market, you seldom hear a head coach make a decision that polarizing and then post game basically try to defend his decision by throwing the player under the bus. And the fact that that was the approach he took, I think obviously the decision itself was going to cause backlash no matter what. But then his comments about it, and I'd be curious to ask you guys, I was thinking about this as you both were talking. You obviously have been here for last season's playoff run for the Stars. And Mike, you said something to the effect of, maybe what Pete DeBoer was saying in this year's locker room wasn't as impactful as last year's. Do you guys feel like there was a big difference in results and I guess how they came about during this Western Conference final run against Edmonton versus last year?
That's interesting. Because ultimately the end result is the same.
The same, yeah.
Their playoff run last year is certainly reminiscent of this one. There are certainly a bunch of similarities there. I don't think, they obviously didn't get the results in the Western Conference final series the same way that they did last year. Last year they were up 2-1 in that series. On
2-1
that level it was. But there is then, the obvious comp of, they lost 3 straight to end that season and they lose 4 straight to end this one. So there are a good deal of similarities. And I don't know, maybe it's just, the sum total of everything is what Jim Nill's looking at and saying, all right, maybe this guy really is just bumping up against his personal ceiling.
Let's also say they were up 2-1 in that series and up 2-0 in game 4.
Yes, they were.
They had total control. They were about to take both games in Edmonton, heading back home for game 5. It looked, and then granted, that's like the first 5 minutes of game 4. They jumped out on them.
Yeah.
So there was still lots of hockey left to be played. Yeah. I'm not saying Edmonton couldn't have mounted a comeback, but I do kind of remember the wheels falling off late in game 4, and it started with some breakaway goals. And granted, I am not putting on any of this at the feet of Ottinger, but it was kind of stark remembering game 4 and how that one transpired, and also thinking as to how the Avalanche started in game 5 this year. And at Avalanche, no pun intended, because they weren't in the Western Conference Finals, but still, but Matthias Janmark on a breakaway goal, I'm sorry, it's not one of their top end talent guys. It's literally a guy that was on Dallas' roster previously. That is a guy that you would expect someone of Ottinger's caliber to be able to stone. So on some level, I can understand where the frustration could probably boiled over. It's like, you're the best goaltender in the world. We just saw it last round, and you're not. You've got to make at least one save in a critical spot like that. And again, it's not. I feel like saying that gives validation to what DeBoer did, and even in the moment when I kind of clocked that was what that was about, it still felt like way too soon, way too panic, as we've already said. But the funny thing is, at this point with DeBoer and his career, you just kind of sit there and think, if you haven't done it yet, and granted, all of these guys go through this. Paul Maurice with the Florida Panthers went through it last year, where he finally went over the hump. And sometimes it just takes a little bit extra. You have the right mix and everything kind of clicks. But the funny thing is, it's like, this was so damaging, or on such a downward trend. There was still a year left on DeBoer's contract. They had every reason to sit there and think 3 straight Western Conference Finals appearances, nonstop regular season success. You would sit there and think, give it one more year. Let's see if they can get over the hump. Whether or not it was different in the locker room throughout both runs, the end result, I think, was enough for management to sit there and think it's not even worth waiting another year at this. We've got to either start the rebuild. I'm not saying they're about to break everything down, but at least begin that process of turning the page to a different voice and see if that clicks this team. And if not, then everything starts.
One thing to clean up, it was 2 straight conference finals with Vegas before missing the playoffs in the 3rd year, and then they fired him. So it wasn't 3 straight with Vegas. He did go to the conference final the season immediately prior, but that was with San Jose. So he was in 3 straight, but it was 2019 with San Jose, 20 and 21 with Vegas, missed the playoffs in 22. So he has been in the conference final 6 of the last 7 years in the Western Conference / in 2020. Obviously, everything was goofy and they played Montreal in the conference final because of the COVID bubble.
Love the bubble. Well, no, that wasn't the bubble. No, that was the bubble. I was thinking the following year when it was just mixed conferences everywhere. It was kind of crazy.
Oh, no, you're right. The bubble was the loss to Dallas. 21 to Montreal was the mixed conferences and the insanity of that season. Anyway, COVID was weird. He did make the Stanley Cup final in his 2nd gig with New Jersey with the Devils in his 1st year with the Devils, but lost to the Kings that year. That was the Jonathan Quick LA Kings back in 2012. So he has gotten there one time. But when you look back through, I'm sorry, he got there again in his first year with San Jose. But then you look through these last 7 years, and it's lost in the conference finals over and over and over again. It does very obviously lead to the question for Pete DeBoer of, is this just kind of, what we're bumping up against, and is it time to have a different voice?
And let's be a little fair to him in his previous appearances. The San Jose team, they ran into a pitch team that went back to back.
Yeah.
The Kings series, that team won 2 and was battling for team of the decade in the early part of it. So it's not like he ran into a bunch of also-rans and then fell apart.
Yeah.
So to some degree, you give him a lot of leeway. And again, it make it 6 out of 7 times. That's not nothing. But
imagine how much the Dallas Cowboys would kill to be in the conference finals once, let alone 6 out of 7 years. Yes, that is absolutely worth stating and stating again. He's a fantastic hockey coach that has had immense success in this league. It just is. It becomes frustrating, I think, for a fan base, and I think it probably evidently became on some level frustrating for Jim Nill in the front office that it just is evidently the ceiling.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting. According to a couple of different reports, like owner Tom Goulardi had, been rumored, at least by Canadian reporters, to, or was suspected that Pete DeBoer was going to be out, and he denied that. And then he even went to the Dallas Morning News earlier this week and was like, he's one of the best top 3, top 5 coaches in the league. Like, I don't really see firing him being on anyone's agenda. Friday morning, different story. But obviously he's not the only voice in that discussion, but he does make a really good point. I mean, you're talking about one of the best coaches in the NHL and who's had sustained success. And if you think about anyone who's going to do a better job than DeBoer, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth where I say, like, to get to the conference final in his first 3 seasons here, and just to say, well, he couldn't get to the final, let alone win it. It's just a little, I don't know, like unfair, because it is so hard to win in this league. And it's especially hard to win in a league where the playoff format is what it is and where the sport is what it is. And it's as physical as football and tiring as basketball. And, it's every series is a 7-game series. Like, you're traveling to Canada every other day. I don't know. I think that it's got to be hard to be Pete DeBoer, honestly. Like, he's probably thinking, what more can I do than win this much? And just because I'm not the one team standing at the end, like, I lose my job again. I don't know.
I was going to say that the track record is kind of fascinating when you think of the teams. I mean, granted, San Jose didn't have success after he left. In fact, they're kind of in a hole right now. But Vegas, basically, the year after he's gone, goes the distance. You know what I mean? Like, that was pretty much immediate. The one thing I will say and there's been a lot of comparisons. I'll throw Sturm in this because I've seen him on Twitter a lot, in regards to kind of calming the Stars fan base on being like, hey, hang with this core. This is a group that can get it done, try and get over the hump. He was trying to make the comparison to the Lightning and their run because they had just as much playoff failure, if you want to call it, prior to their breakthrough in 2020. You're talking Stanley Cup final appearance in 15, Eastern Conference final in 16, didn't make the playoffs 17, Eastern Conference final, President's Trophy winner in 19, flame out in the first round, and then they break through. Like they went through a whole half decade of close calls before they got through. And they were, especially after they flamed out in the first round, a lot of people were calling for John Cooper's head at that point. You hang with them an extra year, they break through, they go back to back. All of a sudden, Cooper's head coach on Team Canada a couple of years later. Like the story of hockey is so much about sometimes the way the puck bounces. And at least in DeBoer's case, it felt like maybe if he could just get the right mixture. Unfortunately, and this is just my personal opinion, it feels like his peak came right at the beginning of the Connor McDavid era, where it feels like McDavid and the Oilers are about to turn the page and just become that juggernaut. Because especially watching how they looked in Game 1, I mean, it's funny watching the Stanley Cup final now and thinking, would this Stars team have matched up against Florida? I'm going to say no. Like, just looking at how these two teams are playing, it feels like two teams that are on a different tier than the rest of the National Hockey League. So we can argue how close you are and how much the roster construction builds and whether or not they're going to get puck luck over the next couple of years. The bottom line is he's not going to get that opportunity now. And specifically, it feels like because he didn't trust his guys, or specifically Ottinger in this case, he didn't sit there and think chips on the line, season on the line. I'm just going to ride or die with who we got and let it go. I feel like had he just stuck with Ottinger, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We'd have one more year, and if it didn't work out, he'd just walk away at the end of the day. And I feel like that's the saddest part of this is he signed his own death certificate in a way. And I don't think there's a way for him. No, I mean, I shouldn't say there's not a way for him. There's plenty of teams that'll jump at the chance to try and get him in there just to change the culture on their team and get a different voice. But if you're looking at someone that can help lead this next group, I mean, it's tough sledding to find someone as decorated as him that's going to keep that team at an upper echelon level beyond just the fact that they've got gobs of talent on every line.
So that gives us a good place to go here, because we've probably got about 15 minutes left or so to I'm sorry, we have 7 minutes left according to our producer, so we do need to kind of get rolling here. By the way, Stars press conference today at noon. We'll carry that here on WFAA Plus as well, so there's plenty more Stars discussion and Stars content coming throughout the day. But let's talk a little bit about, some of the names that might potentially be, and this is just from a list of, coaches that are either available or expected to be available here in the near future. Mike Sullivan, Dave Haxtell, Peter Laviolette, Joel Quenneville, John Tortorella, Jay Woodcroft, a couple of names that are of guys that, names that, have certainly had success in this league. Some to the level of DeBoer, some not, some beyond the level of DeBoer. I don't know how realistic any of those options are. I don't know exactly what Jim Nill is going to be looking for necessarily. We saw a couple of years ago he went into the college ranks and hired Jim Montgomery, and if not for some off-the-ice issues, that could have been a brilliant hire, and at least for a period of time was a brilliant hire, and I think still one of the sharpest minds in the game, but just had some demons during his time in Dallas. So it'll be interesting to see what direction what direction Jim Nill goes with all of this. How do some of those names hit you guys? Any names in particular that you think are should be top of the list?
I mean, I think that Neil Graham has been someone that they've been high on. He's the head coach of their affiliate, the Texas Stars, and they've done their fair share of winning. So I think that from what I had seen, there was talk about him kind of being the heir apparent, and them kind of grooming him as the next head coach. Now, to your point, you just listed off a bunch of names that have NHL experience, and I think there's something to be said for the value of that. But that's just a name that as soon as I saw the tweet this morning, that was really probably the first name that popped into my head.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. There have been plenty of success stories of guys that transitioned from the AHL to the NHL. Literally, John Cooper with Tampa Bay. They
Yeah.
took him from the Syracuse Crunch, bumped up, and basically have rode him since. Talking with some of the other guys, if you want Stanley Cup experience, Sullivan's I think is a great concept. Quenneville scares me just because of the tangential relationship to the whole Blackhawk scandal in the early part of the 2010s. That doesn't seem like a box you want to open for a team that's kind of on edge right now and could teeter either direction. Not saying he's not a good coach, just don't want to touch it. But with Sullivan, at least you could argue Stanley Cup final experience, someone that can come in and set the ship or reset the ship and know that you're going to get probably a good result year one. I think at Graham, he's going to have that relationship and he's going to know guys in the building, and that's going to work within the structure of it. The question will be whether or not you're looking more toward a long term or you're sitting there thinking, we need a guy to just come in, paper this over because we've got the team to win right now and we can do this.
All right, so we'll finish it off with this. Right move or no? Was it the right move to fire Pete DeBoer today, or do you think that they should have hung on for one more year?
I don't think you come back from the comments you made. I think we were all surprised at how long it took, but I don't think we're surprised by the result. Obviously, we're going to sit here and think, whatever's going to happen next year will determine ultimately how it looks. I mean, it kind of feels like we're giving the Stars a little more grace than anything that happened with the Luka trade and how that kind of transpired. But at least in this case, I'm going to sit here and trust Jim Nill. He's done nothing but be successful at this job. And again, two-time general manager year, up for it again for a third straight year. Like this is a guy that if I'm going to trust anyone's hockey IQ, I'm going to lean on Nill and sit there and think he knows what that locker room's like and he's going to make the right decision. So I'm going to say yes.
I just have to say, based on that comment about the Mavs, I told my mom this morning, I said the Stars fired the head coach, and she goes, and the basketball coach is still there?
Oh my God, you're kidding.
I mean, she doesn't know anything more than like when I tell her.
That's
She can't
awesome.
tell you the difference between the Mavs and the Stars, but that just made me think of Andrew. I don't know. It's really hard. I think the human side of me says like it's hard to sit here and say like he should lose his job. He should be fired, especially given the results. I mean, the Stars have had the best record in the NHL for the 3 seasons that Pete DeBoer has been at the helm of this franchise. And I get that like the ultimate goal at the end is what matters. You don't have to have the best regular season record if you're hoisting the Stanley Cup. But to Andrew's point, I do think that you can't come back from those comments. Like I'm picturing Jake Ottinger for the months of June, July, and August, hearing those words pierce through his head on repeat. Like, how does he is the cornerstone of this franchise. He signed an 8-year contract extension in October. They believe in Ottinger and what he can do for this franchise going forward. Pete DeBoer doesn't have that sort of, stability. So, or didn't, clearly doesn't. So yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, I would go down the, like, it's hard to say that he deserved to be fired, but at the same time, and this is what I started with at the beginning, I think this goes a little bit deeper into the roots of like maybe the relationships or how he was perceived by the players from more of a person/respect standpoint. And so in that regard, if you feel like being Jim Nill, if you feel like that tie is severed, it's really hard to have anything else work and to find success with that.
Yeah. It's really rare to see either or scenarios in today's sports landscape, but this really felt like you either side with DeBoer and keep him a year, or you side with Ottinger and keep him long term. And instead of shrinking their window and try and think we'll go one more year, it's like we're going to try and keep Ottinger around. This felt like an assuage. This felt like let's calm the waters for him specifically and keep the cornerstone in place.
Yeah, I think if this were anybody other than Jim Nill, I think I'd be inclined to sit here and think, man, be careful what you wish for. You've been in the conference final 3 straight years. This team's doing really good things under Pete DeBoer. I think the Jim Nill of it all, to your point, Andrew, that to me is what carries the moment. This is somebody that has, with his skins on the wall, with his track record over the course of the last decade plus now of shepherding this franchise, has earned some latitude to have all of us say, all right, let's see what you're going to go do. You need to go get somebody better. And that's a short list of people that you're going to pick from. That's a hard task to go make happen. But if there's somebody that like, this is not the Mavs, this is not the Cowboys.
Nico
You
Harrison.
know, I was going to try not to say the name, but seriously, like that's not this situation. He has earned the opportunity to say, you know what, if this is where you are, if this is what you feel like is the right move, if you feel like maybe he has lost the locker room and it's time to move on, then okay, let's see what the next week or so, or however long this search takes. Let's see where that goes and see who is the next head coach of the Dallas Stars. Because again, he's done enough over the last decade plus to say, show us what you got.
Yeah, the Stars learned from the Mavs a lot, you could tell, because they chose their franchise cornerstone. That's all I'll say.
My
All
job.
right. It's time for us to wrap it up. We've got the press conference coming your way in 35 minutes. We'll carry that here on WFAA Plus, and certainly coverage throughout the day, 4, 5, 6, and 10 all night long about the Dallas Stars' decision to move on from head coach Pete DeBoer. Thanks for joining us.